My name's Cindy Suffin. I'm the publisher of the Idaho Business Review, and I want to welcome you to the fourth breakfast series in the 2025 program series, Commercial Real Estate Around the State. And we're so glad you chose to start your day with us this morning. Idaho Business Review editor Mark Lutz has lined up an excellent panel for today's discussion, and you'll be introduced to them momentarily. But first, the breakfast series would not be possible without the support of our 2025 program sponsors. I'd like to recognize our series presenting sponsor, Hawley Troxell. Hawley Troxell is Idaho's premier law firm. Let's thank them for their support. I'd also like to thank our supporting sponsors, Bank of America and the Grove Hotel. Let's show our appreciation. We are grateful that Boise Center is accommodating us this morning. Typically, the breakfast series is hosted at the Grove Hotel. The Grove Hotel first opened its doors in 1997. The iconic hotel is undergoing a renovation in the lobby, in the 250 guest rooms, and they're updating their public spaces as well. So that is why we had to shift the venue. There's some slides that are up here, but it is quite an undertaking, and you'll see some slides of some changes that are coming to the Grove Hotel. So we're super excited about that, and we will be back at the Grove Hotel in October for our last breakfast series of the year. So this renovation is exciting. We looking forward to the completion of that renovation. And we do appreciate the Boise Center again for accommodating us this morning. And let's thank their staff for their hospitality. Before I turn it over to editor Mark Lutz, I wanted to inform you that today's event is being recorded by videographer Mike DiDonato here in the back. Mike is with the Better Business Bureau, and we are grateful to have their support. Now I'd like to welcome Idaho Business Review editor Mark Lutz to introduce you to our panel this morning. Thank you.
Morning, everyone. As Cindy said, I'm Mark Lutz. I'm the editor of the Idaho Business Review. And I just wanted to give you a little bit of background on today's panel. Well, this was probably one of the easiest panels I've ever had to pull together. Usually there's a little bit of back and forth, and folks will drop out, or some will just not respond. And this one, everybody was right there and ready to go. So I appreciate all of your instant feedback and willingness to participate. When it came to the topics that we wanted to cover, there's no end to the amount of stories that we could do on residential real estate and affordable housing and things like that. And we could probably talk that topic into the ground, but we felt it was necessary to look at one of the other components of real estate, and that being the commercial side, and just how much that impacts growth and is an economic indicator of that growth as well. You look at things like the impact on job creation and employment, contribution to the GDP, influence on the local economies and tax revenue, and the relationship with interest rates. There's so many different aspects to it that show either the growth or the decline of a region. And so we thought it was important to highlight this for those very reasons. And we wanted to make sure that we represented all the different areas of commercial real estate that we could, that being the development, the lending side, the design side, the brokerage side, and just really all of those different areas. And that's how this panel came together. So who we have for you today is, in order of the collector's edition program that you have in front of you, is J.P. Green, the president of CCIM, and he is a partner and of retail brokerage services for TOK Commercial. We have Mark Cleverly, the Chief Leasing Officer of and partner of Allquist, Scott Slange, President of KeyBank, the Idaho market, Jim Marsh, who's the Architect Principal of CSHQA, and Joe Jackson, Executive Vice President of ESI Construction. So we have all of those areas covered, and we want to get right into the conversation because there is a lot to go over. As one of our initial conversations I have with the panelists inform me, the commercial real estate market in Idaho is frothy. And I'll let him explain that to you if he thinks about it. And our moderator today is Justin Cranny, a partner at Hawley Choxel. So Justin, come on up.
Good morning. It is a pleasure to be here. I am also anxious to hear these answers to the questions that will be posed today. And I am very curious about the frothiness factor. I would like to hear an answer to that. So, looking forward to your questions. I'm going to ask a series of questions. Some will be directed, some will not. So to start off today's discussion, I'm going to ask a general question to each of you. To the group, apologize. And each of you answer as you deem fit. So does the commercial real estate market predict or reveal the growth in the Treasure Valley or Idaho as a whole? What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I'll start.
Please, thank you, Mark.
So I think it does for sure. I started my real estate career over 20 years ago at Thornton Oliver Keller, where JP is at, and I was taught a long time ago that commercial real estate will always follow residential real estate by maybe 2 to 3 years, kind of a lag. What we've seen recently, the explosion of the residential side in the Treasure Valley, we are having a hard time on the commercial side, really kind of keeping up, especially in different segments, especially retail and industrial. Office, not so much right now, but definitely on the retail side, we feel it. And JP can talk more about the retail side of that, but our valley is not going to stop growing either. All of us, we think about Micron, right? That one word, and that alone is going to continue to drive the growth in our valley. You hear the numbers that Micron is going to expand or going to increase employment by 7,000-8,000, but the trickle down effect of that alone, you're probably seeing on top of the Micron expansion another 20 to 25,000 jobs on top of the Micron expansion, and so that alone for the next several years is going to continue to make our valley grow, along with a lot of other great factors, right? A lot of us in this room are here because we love the Treasure Valley. We love everything that this valley offers, and that's why we're here. And we're no secret anymore. 20 years ago when I started, Boise was not on the map for a lot of people, but that's not the case. Everybody knows Boise, and we're seeing that in the growth that is currently happening here.
Joe, do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, Mark said it pretty well. With retail and commercial development following residential, it's our Treasure Valley's kind of got their own little flywheel going. It just continues to repeat itself, and with the Treasure Valley making all these great places to live lists and our what used to be a really lower cost of living, it's really kind of sustained itself for the growth. And then you throw Micron in there, and I think that's where somebody's frothiness comment came from, is what's going on out there. But it just between that and Meta becomes kind of a game changer for growth here.
JP, no, please, no. Jim, were you going to say something?
Yeah, I think I just great comments on that. I think the challenge right now is really trying to decipher what that trickle down is from Micron. I think it's just beginning, but really foresee a strong future here in the valley and growth, especially with that. And even even though we think, like say, industrial and office, and some of those seem to be down, we're still building new office, and especially there's underutilized areas. There's places in Caldwell and Eagle and stuff that are adjacent areas that are still feeling quite a bit of growth. So really still feeling pretty bullish on the valley and growth.
Excellent.
I'll add a thought that I hope is not contrarian. But yes, what the reflection is on the Treasure Valley and Idaho as a whole. I think we are seeing a softening in some leases for multifamily. It's certainly showing that there was a lot of investor interest and growth in that space, but there's some vacancies starting to pile up there. I think that is an indicator of some softening or some slowing. I think that's moving towards other verticals, certainly. But I think that's a bit of a bellwether for all of us to pay attention to. We have moved from a tertiary market into a secondary market, and that's really important for the continued growth of Idaho, I think. But what that also means is that from an investor class, for people who don't have roots in Idaho, it's an easy point maybe to pause. So I think that's one thing to keep in mind. Secondarily, I think in the last few years, the access to capital has gotten harder. Others here will probably be able to speak to that better than I have, only a limited perspective. But I think on the balance sheet lending side, which has fueled a lot of construction lending in Valley, that's gotten a little harder for some banks. And that has an impact that we don't probably feel and see for the next year to 3 years. A lot of the developments we've seen are funded from 3 and 5 years ago. But I think that's an indicator to be paying attention to also.
JP, any thoughts or?
I can't confirm or deny that I may have used the word frothy in my conversation with Mark, so I'm the culprit. But it really feels like that because there is such demand, particularly in some of the submarkets, which we'll go into some stats in a little bit. But as a broker, it kind of feels like I'm chasing my tail a little bit, just trying to find space. And inevitably, if I get a new client, we're starting to see now that we are that secondary market, we're seeing regional and national players come into town. And inevitably, when I'm doing my discovery call with them, where do you want to be? North Meridian. And so it's just, you're like, oh boy, this is going to be a tough assignment for us. So, there's some pain that comes along with it, but, compared to a lot of other markets and speaking to other brokers in other markets, we're pretty fortunate to be here in the Treasure Valley.
Excellent. Thank you very much. So with this growth, Mark, question for you. From your perspective, from Allquist as a developer, which segment of commercial real estate do you feel is growing, which are stagnant, which are declining? We're talking hospitality, retail. And you mentioned retail earlier, kind of as it's difficult to get that in. What is your perspective on this?
I got to be careful with this answer here because we at Allquist, historically, we've done a lot of office development. And office isn't I'll call it it's not the sexy word in real estate right now. I mean, office has been on a decline post-COVID. I would say right now, retail is probably the darling of real estate, which is weird to say because back in people remember back in 2014, 15, 16, it was brick and mortars done. Everybody's going to shop online. Everything, the retail shops are going to close, and we're going to see a ton of vacancy. And it started to happen, and then retail has made its way back. People want to go shopping. They want to go touch and feel the product and before they buy it. And so retail is doing very well. Industrial is doing very well in our market. Industrial vacancies remain really low in our market. I think I was talking to Devin Pierce last week at TOK, and he was saying overall it's about a 6% vacancy, which is actually a really healthy market. In fact, maybe even too low. You want to have product on the market for people that are coming to the Valley. And I will say office for us, as in the nation, office is not looked at as doing very well. And banks don't want to lend on office right now. But I would say in our Valley, office is actually done very well. But you have to be it's that old adage of real estate, right? Location, location, location. You have to have the right location. It's got to be the right product. Post COVID, a lot of employers, they want to have their people back at the office. And I think we've worked ourselves through that here in the Valley. But in order to bring them back to work, they've wanted to provide a Class A office space, something, that people are proud to go to, that people want to go to. Instead of staying at home and working from home, they want to come and feel a part of the team and feel part of their space. And so we've benefited from that because a lot of our, everything that we have is brand new construction, and people are willing to pay a little higher rate for the brand new construction. So you see in the office side, the Class B and Class C spaces, their vacancy is higher than the Class A. And so that's, you have to be really careful with how you look at it on the office side. But for us, our portfolio, we're about close to 99% leased in our portfolio, which is fantastic. And we have about 2 million square feet that we own here in the Valley. And so we're even bullish on office right now. And I would say too, multifamily is probably that one area that is struggling, just because a lot of it is the way the lenders are looking at it, and the way the economics are working. Costs are high. Joe can speak to that. And interest rates have remained high. They haven't lowered them, which everybody thought they were going to lower interest rates over the last 6 to 12 months, and they haven't done so. But I think you will start seeing rates lower, which will help a little bit on the development side.
Thank you, Marty. Joe, similar question from your perspective as a contractor and looking current projects and future projects. Which markets are, kind of the retail, industrial, office segments are growing or declining?
Well, I'll start with some of the obvious. Look out the window downtown here and you'll see a tower crane, any window, right? I remember 15 years ago, we would get super excited for one tower crane in our downtown market. Now it's the norm to have 5 to 7, at any given time. And to me, that represents a lot of confidence in our downtown, confidence in downtown housing and hospitality. So to me, that's really exciting. Makes me feel really proud of our downtown. So that's obviously interesting and fun to be a part of. The other big obvious one is Micron, right? That's just the substantial effort there. And I don't know if everybody knows some of the numbers, and don't quote me exactly, but there's nearly 10 million square feet of building being added out there as just part of this first fab expansion. So that's, if you wrap your head around what 10 million square feet is, so it's a lot. In addition to that, there's a lot of other markets that are quietly, doing a lot of business out there. You mentioned the multifamily. There is still some multifamily getting built. There is still some industrial getting built. The Permanent Building Fund is investing in Boise State and CWI and some of these other institutions and spending hundreds of millions of dollars. Infrastructure, water and wastewater, the city of Boise is spending hundreds of millions of dollars improving our water infrastructure. Meta is quietly doing $1.5 billion out in Kuna and maybe more in the future. St. Luke's is going to spend $1 billion over the next 5 years in construction costs. So there are so many groups that are busy. And then not to mention, Tommy and Mark's development out of 10 Mile that's going to be heavy on retail. It goes on and on. So it's really a crazy market, very busy, and it's a lot of fun to be a part of right now.
Excellent. Thank you. Scott, there have been some comments about, interest rates.
Those were aspersions that were cast at me.
Assuming the rumor's true, or the comments were true, what are some of the challenges that lenders are facing right now? There was some comments about interest rates, but what else are you seeing as kind of a inhibitor to lending?
Well, just to go back to some of the comments, they're valid. I think you have to understand that bankers are not that smart. We need a high level of predictability, and we have a very low risk profile to be able to lend. So you have the best source of capital, cheapest in the market, a traditional balance sheet, But when predictability becomes difficult, i.e. predicting the office market, so even though I think in the Valley that's true, that we still have a bullish market, as you mentioned, it's not necessarily true everywhere else. And there's vast markets that are having challenges in that space right now. You can look at Portland as just a good case example of buildings that sold for $360 million 5 years ago that are selling for $35 million today, right? So it's a huge difference. That withstanding, additionally, there was 3 major institutions that had some capital issues in the last few years. And that really, I think, sucked some fervor out of the market, and it made a lot of banks have to retrench a little bit, which makes it harder to lend. In addition to that, you had the most volatile rate market that we've had maybe in history, at least in a short version, and a lack of foreseeable future as to what will happen with interest rates or the government policies. So I think that's a large apologetic appeal to say it's tough being a banker and we want to lend more. I think that being said, though, the market has priced in 2 rate cuts this year. That's what the market predicts already for bonds. So if there's anything less than that this year, that will be disruptive. If they came out in a month and a half and did it by 1%, even though that would be good for the bond markets in some fashion, it would be outside of the prediction, and so it would cause disruption for a period of time. But I think that the market has stabilized by and large, and that most lenders are back in a position that they're able to be participatory in the market. A few of those sectors are a little bit harder. Construction in some categories, office in particular, if you want to do brand new office, a little harder to finance unless you have proven track records and great sponsors and low loan to costs. I think the market used to be able to be financed around 70, little mid 70s to cost, and that market's probably lower to 50% to cost these days. And so that means on a $25 million project, there's a lot of equity that has to go into those transactions, right? Relative to some of the verticals that you talked about, we too think that retail is the hot market right now. Ironically, anchored tenant by grocery store is really easy to finance. And to his point, 10 years ago, that was starting to be a secondary thought and wasn't driving the market. Right now, that's true. Anchored tenant projects that are retail are hot. Hotel, as you guys can all tell, hotel has gone through a resurgence, and I feel like that's a market that every 15 years gets hot and then gets a little quieter and gets hot again. So that's one that we're seeing a lot of now. And we still do office, but for the best of credit tenants, right? The best people. And then lastly, industrial, I think was mentioned. That also is here in the Valley, but also nationally, is a really hot product.
That's been hot for quite a while, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Well, fingers crossed to predictability for you, so your job gets a bit easier. Jim, quick question for you, kind of changing topics a little bit. How do architects at your firm really try to design something original but still stay Idaho? What elements do you kind of focus on?
Yeah, I think that's a good question, a tough one. I think ultimately, from our architecture standpoint in our firm, we try to start with a deep respect for place, being it, land and climate and culture. From inspiration standpoint, I think we're pretty lucky that we have a deep context to draw from the environment, being the foothills to the valleys to desert to mountain to timber to water. It's all those kind of things come into play, and where our actual buildings are sitting. Same thing culturally, whether it's agricultural or it's urban, or now we have tech or mining or timber and all of those kind of things. We can draw and bring all those things into our inspiration for our projects. And ultimately what we want to have is a design that feels rooted rather than planted or imported. And I think that's our ultimate goal for this. And typically we kind of start with the environmental pieces, especially with locally with the sun and doing solar studies and being aware of placemaking and views and all of those such, and also using regional appropriate materials of wood and stone And although those are, I guess, aesthetic materials, they're also things I think that kind of ground the buildings to the site. Um, and kind of finally, I think one of the more important pieces is collaboration with local craftsmen and artisans pieces here. I mean, some of our most successful projects and stuff really have those elements in them. One of the some examples, like at the warehouse, they took a couple of railroad spikes and welded them together, and those are the door pulls to get into the building. To things like classic design that built these arched bars at the Treeford Music Hall, and Philip over at Boise Art Glass with these beautiful art pieces and chandeliers that are in multiple projects across the valley, and just a myriad of others. Those and although I'd love to, point people to the beautiful cornice work I have at the top of the building, often we got comments on, the front desk or the millwork or the art pieces that are in there. And, those collaborations with the contractors and the artisans and those craftsmen are, I think, are the pieces that really take the uniqueness up a full level. And I think it really ties and grounds us with the community.
Thank you. That's great. So just follow-up question on that. So do a lot of clients come specifically with ideas about what they're looking for to keep it Idaho, or is it something that your firm helps push or generate?
Yep. Yeah, both. There's certain clients, clients come in all kind of spectrums. Some that have basically really rely on you to draw that out and to bring those to you, and others that have strong ideas and designs already. So I think it's a variety. I think that the ones that are design savvy, I think we can more quickly get to the point of what those unique elements are. The others, I think you just kind of have to pull the story. It's like pull the story out of them of why they're doing this product and why they're actually in Idaho and why in Boise, and try to build that story prior to even getting started with design.
Thank you very much. So JP, from a broker perspective, we've had a lot of comments about the kind of segments of commercial real estate that are growing or not growing as much. As a broker, do you have a similar perspective? And then also, just as a question, maybe we can all get some clarification on or explanation. How does a brokerage tie in with commercial development? So two-part question there. Sorry.
You bet. So I specialize in retail. So I would agree. At one of our recent meetings, one of our investment brokers said that the retail segment on the investment side was even the belle of the ball. So, fortunate in this market, retail is very strong. Industrial is still very strong. I was talking with Devin as well. He's said there's really kind of two markets now in industrial. And if you look at the overall vacancy, that's really being driven by these large spaces that are now on the market. But if you're looking for 5,000 square feet or less in industrial, it's virtually impossible to find. So kind of two complete different worlds. And again, office has not been the sexy segment in the market. But when I talk to our office brokers, they're having a hard time finding space. And a lot of it is because it's, maybe not up to the level that people want if it's Class A. And then to build it to that Class A is incredibly expensive. So, but yeah, retail right now in our market is definitely very strong. And then to the second question, as far as the relationship with development and brokerage, it's very symbiotic. I think that we rely on one another. It's important, especially in a market like this, that we have developers like CenterCal Properties and Allquist and Hawkins companies, that they're out there delivering products so that we have places that we can place our clients and tenants that are looking to come to the market. And some of the smaller developers that do build-to-suit, we have a lot of clients that have unique needs. And so, to have a developer that understands how to do that can go down and take down a pad and design and build and still have a reasonable rental rate for that client. It's very important to have those kind of relationships to be able to get deals done and be able to get tenants placed in locations. And it's interesting, kind of one of the most exciting areas that I would say that's happening in the market right now is what we consider West Downtown. So, it used to be you get past 10th and it was kind of no man's land and nobody wanted to go in retail. No, it's past 10th, can't do that. It's outside of that downtown corridor. But there's so many doors that are going to be delivered from, 10th down to the river hundreds and hundreds of doors that are either being delivered or scheduled to be delivered. And so it's completely changing the landscape. We're getting major players, regional players that are now wanting to look at our downtown because we're not such a commuter market now. We've actually got, you got people that have owning apartments or condos, and it's becoming way more walkable. And so just to see that area kind of going through a revitalization and having some interest, I think it's going to be an exciting thing over the next couple of years.
Excellent. Thank you very much. So one benefit of having 5 of you here from 5 different industries in commercial real estate is being able to get perspective. You all work very well together. You have to some degree because you work, it's a symbiotic relationship. What does a collaboration look when you're starting to do something in commercial development or something in commercial real estate? How does this relationship work between all of you? So general question for each of you. What are your thoughts?
So from a developer's perspective, we dream up these great projects, beautiful projects, but we collaborate on a weekly basis with a general contractor, with ESI. I think we meet with Joe's team every week on some projects that we have going with them. We meet with architects every week, and we meet regularly with brokers. And then our finance team, we're constantly in discussions with lenders, with banks. And so for us, from our perspective, it's not a monthly thing, it's a weekly thing. And because you have to, and you can't let weeks go by without having information and understanding the details of your projects. And so it's very collaborative. It's very, we can't, we spent, when COVID hit, we were home for maybe 2 weeks and we couldn't do it anymore. We're very much, the development process is very much hands-on, and you have to be in the same room together, and you have to, you have to bounce ideas off each other and understand costs and understand designs. And so it's not an industry that you can just kind of sit back and wait for information to come to you. You have to go find it, and you have to collaborate with all the teams that make a project work.
I'd say, now more than ever, and really since 2008, when things slowed down, costs have kind of been on the uptick a little bit, and labor's been tough to find. Contractors, subcontractors have been tough to find for projects. So during that whole time, collaboration has become more key to be able to really predict costs, so that at the end of the day, Scott will finance your project. And really, it takes a lot of collaboration. Like Mark said, we're talking to design partners and our customers, developers, tenants, even brokers, all the time about where the design's at. So that's one piece of the communication is, everybody sitting at this table. But the other, even more critical piece is between a contractor and all the trade partners is really digging in and communicating a lot more than we used to. The vendors, suppliers, finding out where materials pricing is going, trying to forecast some of these problems that might be coming up, mitigate them if we can, order materials early if we can. It takes a lot more creativity and a lot more communication. Thankfully, COVID kind of taught us how to communicate better and more often. I don't think I ever did a Zoom call before 2020. And now, I've probably got 6 of them on my calendar this week or more. So, granted, in-person meetings are much better, but we just communicate a lot more often because it's so easy to jump on the computer and chat. So really just communication both ways for us with the people at this table as well as the trade community, so that we can accurately predict what things are going to cost. Thank you.
I think the industry in general has come to the point where they value the collaboration and see what it can actually bring. Projects are increasingly becoming more complex. Pricing is getting more challenging to predict all the time. And so with as many variables that are out there, the more team members and collaboration you can bring together, the more accurate you can be as you're moving forward. And I think the only other piece I may add to that is there's a big increase in collaboration with your local building departments and planning departments, and getting in front of those guys early, and looking at them as more partners of how to develop the best that support both of your guys' goals rather than being adversaries as it could have been in the past. And so you see a lot more of that as well. But the value of bringing together a trusted team has really increased, I think, over the last few years.
Chippy?
Yeah, it's especially with newer projects, it's vitally important that all of us are kind of on the same page, because you have a piece of dirt, it's a blank canvas, and you have a developer that has this idea and it sounds great, but they have a conversation with us and say, okay, what's the gap analysis? What tenants are going to want to be here? What will they pay? Okay, if that's who we can get, and what will they pay? Well, what can we design? And what does it need to look and feel like to be able to get those kind of tenants to come, and that where customers are going to want? We're really noticing, particularly in retail, that the whole lifestyle element, where people want to be able to have community while they're shopping and have other areas of attraction rather than just the stores, is vitally important. So, from the design, how do we do that? And then how do we pay for it? How are we going to build it? How are we going to get finance? Where's the money going to come from? And then how are we going to find the subs to actually get it done so we can deliver it on time for these tenants? And so we have to work congruently, or projects don't get done to the level that they need to.
Thank you. Scott, do you have any comments?
I would just annotate to say that this is a market where highest in class gets the most bang for the buck. I think we went through a period where lowest cost might have been people's preferences, but dependability right now really is the most important thing. And when we look at projects, proven track records, the ability to keep employees in projects the whole period is really critical to financing these projects. So, the board that we have here, plus others in this room, it's really important, I think, to work with best in class at this point.
Good point. Thank you very much. Let's stick with you real quick, Scott. There's been some comments about interest rates. From your perspective, has that hindered development? Or do you believe that developers are adjusting or somehow otherwise accounting for those interest rates?
Yeah, I think the IIR has changed for most people. I think also sensitivity analysis has had to get wider than it was 3 and 4 years ago. And so that affects, I think, what projects start as a result of starting from that place. But I think that market has stabilized, like I mentioned earlier, and people are more accepting of the market that we have. Not that anybody's not anticipatory of rates going down, but I think we had a hangover of everybody wanting a cost of capital that probably never happens again. If you look at the standard deviation over 80 years, it was around 7.5%. Over the last 12 years, it was closer to 4. And so it's hard to connect that delta and say what's ongoing current rates, and then just get buckled in and say, this is what we got. So I think, though, that part is over. Interestingly, on the market for businesses in their sales, which this also impacts less than, differently than real estate, that has not changed. People still want market rates for 3 or 4 years ago. But I think real estate's a lot more pragmatic, and people adjusted, and now we're ready to go. I think, and I'd love to hear if other people feel differently. But
Mark, your thoughts on that? You adjusting to the interest rates?
Yeah, so I was just writing some comments down to Scott's point. So the first 10 to 15 years that I was in the business, we didn't see rates increase, rental rates really at all. Downtown was always, 17 to 19 bucks a square foot. Out in the suburbs, it was a little lower than that. But in the last 6 years, because of interest rates, because of costs, those rates don't make sense anymore. And then you look at Boise compared to Seattle and Portland and San Francisco and Salt Lake, all these other bigger markets around us, and we were so much lower. Seattle their rates were $50, $60, $70 a square foot. And here Boise we're at 18, and we're just stuck here. And for years it felt like we were stuck. And so as we've matured as a market, those rates in the last 6 years, we're now out in Meridian, we're $25 to $26 a square foot, triple net. we have moved from, a lot of developers or owners will quote you on a full service rate. We've tried to move to a triple net rate comparative to other markets around us. And so we're $25-$26 a square foot in those markets, whereas 6 years ago we were probably for a triple net rate we were probably $15 to $16. And so you've seen, because of interest rates the increase, because of cost the increase, and really just because Boise is Boise now, right? And we're able to increase rates, and people are willing to pay them, and we have to keep up with that in order for projects to work right now. We've got to keep looking at rates, because that's the one area that we can control as a developer. We can't, costs are going to do what they're going to do. Interest rates are going to do what they do. And we look at all those factors. And then at the very end of our pro forma, we look at rate, right? And what do we need to achieve on our rate in order for this project to work and to pencil? And so we have had to push rate, but we're still, you look at us, you still look at Boise compared to these other markets, we're still so much lower than these other markets. We still have a lot of room to grow, or a lot of room to go, to reach those. And so we're still, companies will still look at Boise and say it's still, for us, it's still an attractive market, because it's, our rents are lower, and so our real estate is cheaper here than it is in other markets. And so that's a factor for us. Whereas a lot of us that are from here, we look at those rates, we're like, holy cow, there's no way we're at 25 and 26. That's way too expensive, but it kind of is what it is, and that's the one area that we can push in order for make a project to work.
Thank you.
Justin, can I add one thing?
Please do.
I think one benefit of our market growing and having more opportunities, there's also new or different capital sources. We have Lifeco, agency, HUD, CMBS, LIHTC, CTL transactions. There's a lot more avenues for financing than just traditional balance sheet product, which I think has fueled a lot of growth historically. Those other doors are now open because we have a market that has more attention and more investor demand.
Excellent. Thank you. Since we're on the topic of costs, Mark and Joe, one of the questions that we have is, from the time you think up of a great new project and the time you start construction, how do you deal with cost fluctuations?
I'll let Joe answer that.
I was going to say that's Mark's problem. Well, kind of like I said before, it's, well, first of all, it starts with setting the right budget up front. And, we always advocate that you should really be talking to a contractor early on when you set your budget, especially in times like these, because it's really hard to predict where costs are at. And you really need to get to the source. You can't use just your historical cost per foot from 5 years ago anymore. So starting with the right budget, understanding expectations, meeting with a designer, and starting with the right budget. And then the second part is that communication piece, is really communicating a lot with the design team, a lot with the customer, to make sure that the expectations and the goals are not changing. And then communicating significantly with the marketplace, the trade marketplace, the suppliers. We've got, tariff talk every day, and understanding where that's going. Is it real? Is it fabricated? And trying to understand that market. And it's, there's no silver bullet. And it's, we're still not going to get it exactly right, but communication certainly helps.
Yeah, just to echo off that, I would say we've talked about collaboration earlier, and that's the biggest key for those costs too, is just collaborating, communicating. You do hear the word tariff, even though a lot of those tariffs haven't been put into effect yet. They're still, suppliers will still say, oh, tariffs are coming, and so we're hedging against that right now. And so you see that.
Yeah, just a few tidbits on the tariffs, and a lot of people probably know this, but there's some, steel is a part of most of our buildings, and tube steel is a big piece of a lot of the buildings, the columns. Almost all of that we're getting from somewhere else, Canada or Mexico or somewhere else. So as we see tariffs, those are going to be affected. Tube steel maybe is 50% of the steel product, but the thing to remember is it's just the raw material. the actual price you pay for a structural steel product, a third of it is fabrication, a third of it is detailing, and a third of it is the raw material. So you're not really looking at 5, 10, 15% of your entire steel package. And that's something I think if you don't really drill down, you know, that scare factor kind of gets to you. The other one that to be worried about a little bit is copper. 44% of our copper comes from China. And so as we, and there's copper in all of our electrical throughout all of our buildings. So it's one to continue to watch.
Thank you. Jim, question for you about, on the topic of costs, of course. What is value analysis and how do you deal with that?
Yeah, value analysis. Well, it used to be started out with its roots with value engineering, which was not a popular term around the firm, which really kind of originated as kind of a traditional design process where we'd go through and coordinate the projects kind of independently with our clients to the point where the project got bid out, and at that point they found out that the budget and the costs were not aligned, and we did value engineering. Well, it sounds fancy a way of how can we get this building put back into budget, which unfortunately usually has barely impacts on the quality and the design. And so a lot of times, your expectations is what are the sacrifices that are going to need to happen with this term we called value engineering, as well as time lost, additional fees for re-engineering and all of that. And some projects didn't move forward accordingly. So over the last few years, that collaboration piece really has come together where we call it value analysis now, where we try to encourage all of our projects to have as many players as possible from day one associated with the project. As Joe stated, we can't say that, core and shell stuff costs $200 a square foot because it did 5 years ago. But and for a number of years, you could do a pretty good job of taking historical construction costs and being in the ballpark. And with the pace at what different items are changing, having a full team on board early is absolutely critical. And so what that allows us to do is to restructure how our deliverables are to our clients and agencies and such. So if we can dictate what those hurdles and milestones that we need to have a successful project, especially with the contractor, we can tailor our, like say, our deliverables. So we may break things out into multiple packages. For example, as Joe said, if steel is our longest lead item, we will put the emphasis on getting the structural and the steel design prior to all other parts of the design, so we can release the steel as early as possible, so we can get that package going, or utilities, and just breaking things out into multiple packages while still having transparency and the confidence from our clients that the overall cost is under control by taking that risk before you have the full bid of the whole cost of the project. And so those check-in points, milestones along through that design with cost, the design team, as well as the contractor bringing in their trade information all the way through this. It's like, hey, I know you're speccing out train, but the train guys aren't here and you use Linux or something, just those kind of things where we can make smart decisions at the get-go to really circumnavigate any kind of rework, redesign that costs time and money. So again, that collaboration from day one with as many team members as possible is really the most valuable thing from that value analysis.
Excellent. Thank you. And JP, we've talked a lot about costs in this value analysis. How have costs and interest rates and various, the cost to generate a development, how has it impacted commercial real estate from the broker's perspective?
Well, particularly interest rates on the sales side of things have had an impact. So I did a little analysis. So these numbers are a little skewed in 21 and 22. Those were crazy years, highest volume that we did, and these were numbers just from TOK. But I took a look in 2021. we had 149 properties that were sold, and we kind of designate property sales as either owner-user sales or investment sales. So that breakdown of that, there was 62 user sales and 87 investment sales, again, back in 2021. And so far this year through July, we're projecting 108 sales, 55 user sales, so really not that much of a difference from 2021. But our investment sales are projected to be 53. So definitely seeing that. And again, it really is driven by the interest rate. If you're putting debt on an investment sale, our sellers are still very proud of their properties, and so they want to have a 5 or a low 6 cap rate. And if interest rates are in the high 6s, low 7s, makes it very difficult to pencil if you're putting a significant amount of debt on that property. So we're still seeing some volume for some of the smaller transactions, sub $3-4 million, where maybe it's a 1031 or there's more equity that's being put into it. And we are still seeing owner users that this is what they want and what they need to do and where they want to be for their business, and so they're factoring that in and making those purchases. But it definitely has had an impact on the sales volume.
Thank you. Joe, we've had discussion, or you mentioned Micron, St. Luke's, Meta, very large projects for the Valley. How has this impacted the workforce? Because I know we've had other comment about subs, trying to find the good subs so we can get projects done. Obviously, with large projects, that has a massive draw on the workforce. What are you seeing?
Well, we're certainly feeling it. One, the skilled workforce is getting strained as far as supply, and we're paying more for it. That's probably the initial thing we're seeing right now is wages have gone up in all trades across the Valley. I don't think we've seen, well, I know we haven't seen the worst of the trade deficit, because, Micron's nowhere near their peak right now. And just to put it in perspective, their peak for, say, the electrical trade, they're going to need more electricians on that one project than we have licensed electricians as Idaho residents. So they're going to need to get a lot from out of state. And so depending on how successful they are in attracting trades from out of state will kind of affect how much we feel it in the rest of the Valley. I think in the long run, with Micron's new announcement with another fab and more investment in the Valley, I think that there's the potential that this could be an eventual good thing for our skilled trade workforce. It's going to take some time to realize it, but much like 2008, we had a mass exodus in the construction trades. People in the trades were leaving. Nobody was entering the trades. There wasn't work. The pay wasn't there. Now it's quite the opposite here. There's a runway with a lot of work. The wages have gone up. I think, we're having a lot more success attracting trades into our company. And I think other people will as well. It'll take them time to become proficient, but I think in the long run, it could be better for the trade workforce in our Valley.
Thank you. Anyone else facing similar kind of growth issues? JP?
I think we had some similar things, I think, from that 2008, where, at that time with the industry change, there's a lot of folks that left the architecture and engineering field and then didn't ever come back. And so there's a gap. Additionally, Idaho's a little pressed because, we don't have large colleges. The University of Idaho is basically our only school with architecture program, and we only have a couple within the engineering program. So we have a smaller pool to draw from. So we really have to extend our reach out nationwide to really find, to fill those gaps in the labor side. And, luckily our industry has been good about remote work. It's still challenging. It's still our preferred to have people locally in offices. But continuing to find labor is on the design side is challenging.
Thank you. Jim, while you're talking, let me ask you one more question. What are some of the biggest challenges you are facing as an architect with commercial real estate?
Kind of coming back to the VA pieces and trying to control cost. There's still a little traditional pushback to not having a total open book and a collaborative one. So those are still a challenge. Timelines haven't gotten any better for any of these things. So wanting more in less time. Jurisdictions continually are getting more complex and having more requirements. It's with the advent of modeling and BIM, which is kind of circumnav or sorry, that replaced AutoCAD and drafting more. There's a higher demand for more information at all times to be put into design and to drawings. And so, yeah, I think it's more work in less time, and that's still, it's going to continue. And we're hoping as technology increases, and I think AI will probably have a pretty significant input into our industry, and actually streamlining some of those more mundane things so we can concentrate on more of the design pieces. But uh, ultimately, we still take pride in the design portions and the creativity of architecture. But time constraints and being able to control costs with the contractor and scope is probably still our biggest challenges.
Thank you. JP, we had some discussion earlier about some vacancy rates. What are, from your perspective as a broker, what are the current vacancy rates and what struggles are clients facing as they try and find new space?
So I'll speak to retail just again because that's where I specialize in. Really, it varies across the valley. I looked through June in Ada County. We're about 4.3% vacancy in Ada County. We kind of break the markets into submarkets, and so the highest vacancy we have is what we consider the North Boise submarket, which is basically just outside of downtown on State Street out to Eagle is the North submarket. That's got 9.54 vacancy, and then you have Meridian, and the Meridian market is broken into 3 submarkets. We have North Meridian, South Meridian, and Eagle Road. That vacancy rate is 1.2, and Eagle Road is less than 1. So to Mark's point, in industrial, 6 to 8% is healthy. Same thing in retail, 6 to 8% is healthy. And so you can see it's very challenging in Meridian right now to try and find space. And then ironically, Star is 0.54% vacancy. So Star is definitely on a lot of people's radar. In Canyon County, their vacancy is about 6.3%. Caldwell Boulevard submarket is at 7.52. Caldwell, the city itself, that submarket is at 6. But then South Napa, 0.64. So 12th Street, still very, very, very attractive, still very difficult to find space. So, and one of the more kind of attractive areas, I would say, for retail right now is because Class A space is so expensive. I mean, for Class A space prior to the pandemic, we were high teens, low 20s. And now for new construction projects, I mean, we basically got into the high 20s, skipped the 30s, and are now into the low to mid 40s. And if you're Class A, we've got a couple of things that we're seeing that are in the $50 range. So if you've got good Class B retail, and that used to be mid-teens, well, we're really starting to see those landlords, if they're willing to invest a little bit in TIs for those tenants, they're now able to add $3, $4, $5 and get $18, $19, $20 for Class B retail. So those owners that have Class B retail, it's so hard to find second generation space, particularly in Meridian. They're able to increase those rental rates.
Those are surprisingly low. Scott, one last question on lending. Agribusiness. How does lending on that compare to other commercial real estate?
It's harder. I think the main, just to make it a succinct answer, is you're using 3-year averages for yield on real estate if you're lending to the production farming. If you're no longer doing production farming, and that is probably the largest trend in Idaho over the last 10 to 15 years, are farmers no longer wanting to continue to farm land for various reasons and trying to sell the property. Those 2 markets then are to sell to a sub who's just leasing and using, or often to developers or others. If you were to look at, I see a few title people here, but there is a trend of a lot of that land being purchased and aggregated into fewer hands, which is kind of an interesting thing to pay attention to. But the short answer is it's much, much harder. There's greater need, though, to be able to lend into those production facilities or lots. So there are more lenders coming into Idaho that will provide that type of financing because the market got a little still there.
Thank you. Mark and Joe, you each have good businesses in developer construction. How does the development in Idaho compare to other states?
Well,
Well, I mean, I meant to, so I know, Alquist has development in other states, and so maybe that's the segue we can go and follow.
sure. Yeah, we have a project down in Reno, Nevada that Joe and his team are working with us on it, and I'll just say that it's going to be a great project, Joe. It's going to be amazing. We're redeveloping. I don't know if anybody's familiar with Reno, but we're redeveloping the old Harrah's Casino in the downtown area. It's been vacant for several years. It's 1.2 million square feet. We got brought in from the previous owner and asked. He came to us. We've known him for a long time. He came and asked us to help him, and so we've kind of taken that project on. It's going to be over time. It'll be great. The downtown Reno is not downtown Boise. It's a lot different. I mean, so part of my answer here is be grateful that we live in Boise, because
Second that.
right, yeah. So development in the Treasure Valley and Boise area, Boise Meridian, all the surrounding areas, we feel very blessed to be here in our market. We look at Reno, we look at Salt Lake, the Utah area. Utah's booming, and we've have opportunities there to go and develop. But it always draws us back to the Treasure Valley, just because of where it is, and we believe in this market. You see the national news of real estate, of the office market, of the world's crashing, and you hear about the buildings in Portland and San Francisco that we're selling for in the $200-300 million ranges, are selling for 10% of that right now, and they're all vacant, and they're all boarded up, and nobody's even going to go into them for who knows how long, right? I mean, I don't know when that corrects itself, but we didn't feel that here. We didn't feel that in our market. We didn't. We feel we're grateful that we live here. We're grateful for this community, this valley, the collaboration that happens. And so, to answer your question, Justin, I mean, we have opportunities to go other markets, and for the right project, we'll do it. But we're always drawn back to the Treasure Valley and what we're doing here, because we really believe in this area.
Yeah, I would say go spend a couple days in downtown Reno, and you'll feel really lucky that you live in Boise. No, in all seriousness about Reno, they have the right attitude of, I mean, it's like Boise 20-30 years ago. They want to do things. They are collaborative, and this, as Mark mentioned, the project we're working on, we're experiencing a really collaborative city government, trying to help get things done and clean up downtown. So we're hoping to help improve that. As far as other places we've worked, all around the country, and it's different parts of the country do things differently. They have different jurisdictions. I mean, you look at Washington and the Seattle area, it's not the city, it may be the county, or maybe it's the county, then the city. They have layers and layers of jurisdictions that look at your projects, and they have historically been so busy, and they've become just kind of, they're in no hurry to help you out. And that's just so different from what we experience here in the Valley, whether it's Boise, Meridian, Kuna, Nampa, Caldwell. And, I'm sure things can be difficult and they can take time, but they're considerably worse in other parts of the country. So generally, I feel really lucky that we're doing this type of business in the Treasure Valley.
Thank you. So those are the questions we have for the panel today, and now we can open it up for questions from the audience if there are any. Sir?
Yeah, thank you guys for your time. It's very insightful. Cool to hear from a larger market. It seems like there's obviously a huge focus on development and vertical construction. with interest rates and land prices where they are, seems like naturally there would be a shift towards, and JD touched on this a little bit, towards rehabilitation and renovation. What are your guys' thoughts on that?
Well, yeah, from the brokerage side, I'm 100%. Just because, again, we do have national and regional tenants that $40 a foot or $45 a foot is normal. But for a lot of our mom and pop shops that are here that have been in business for 20 years and we're paying in the low teens in rent to try, and if they want to expand or maybe their lease is coming up or their place is obsolete, I think there's some opportunity for some of the larger strip centers, and we're starting to see this. Some grocery anchored centers that maybe just a little bit tired are getting facelifts, and they're trying to create some curb appeal, so that tenants are a little bit more drawn to those particular locations. And it's, again, there's lots of traffic. It's grocery anchored, and if they can, if the rent is half of what they're paying to be in new Class A space, I think there's a big opportunity for that. Yep.
Here I have a
One thing I was that I believe you guys might touch on also was just kind of the medical. I know you touched sorry, I have a loud voice anyway. I know you guys touched on office, but what about the medical? Because we have the medical school in Meridian. And so I've always been kind of curious. I have friends that are moving out of state, like to Nashville and to Boston. But what are we doing in Idaho to attract more doctors for that's, like, because I heard you guys talk about the office, but how is the medical office retail going?
That's a great question. I don't know if any of us are smart enough to answer that. Scott probably is. No, I'm just kidding.
I'm not. If I think though, if St. Luke's was here, they would say that they're very bullish on the market. They're trying to attract more doctors. They have a lot of programs in place to do so. I think part of the inhibitor to your question is we don't have as many individual practices or larger practices in Idaho. Not to say that there's a monopoly here, but there's only a few players. So it's going to take increased interest where practices want to come and replant in Idaho. And there aren't a lot of incentives to draw businesses into the state to do that with a lot of costs. So I don't see that probably changing. They're going to have to create more incentives for the doctors, certainly. And there's going to be more space, as they mentioned, for St. Luke's and St. Alphonsus. And I think a third player that might be coming too. But I don't see a lot of growth happening.
It is interesting too. It's St. Al's is, we've heard recently that they're looking at expanding in 3 different areas right now, 3 different markets in the valley. You had IHC based out of Utah, come to the market and then pull out, which was interesting. And I don't know if it's because they just can't compete with St. Luke's and St. Al's. But I think with the growth that we've had, there is a huge need for increase in medical care, and increase in our hospital systems, and they just haven't kept the pace with the growth. And so I think we all feel it and see it and know that the expansion needs to happen.
Good morning. My question is, we're kind of at an unprecedented time with institutional money entering into our market. So how do you feel about that as a developer and in the banking industry?
Oh, me first. Well, I think NIMBYism is probably as high as it's ever been. And so the current impact for us who our lives are based here, I think the outside capital is a bit challenging for those reasons because there's outside influence that's starting to dictate our market. For all of us who have an economic engine that are based on growth, I think that's, for lack of a better term, a necessary evil and also a reflection of a maturation of our market. So it's important. But I think working with local firms where possible, where brokers can help ensure outside capitals using local GCs and others, it helps buoy it and station it to what our ideals are and what we need. But we're in a growth curve right now that I think is challenging. Some projects are harder to get done because of municipalities or how people and neighborhoods feel about a project being done. And I think that is just a reality that we will continue to be in this state. And you hear a lot of people say that Utah is Boise 20 years ago, and you could see what happened in Utah in this category. And there was some friction for a while. So from an investor standpoint, or for how we finance that, I think the one thing that I pay attention to is that that capital source is local and not coming out of Los Angeles or New York. That's an important part of making sustainability for financial partners who are here and subs and everybody else.
And we've been blessed with a lot of the funds that we use on our projects have been Idaho driven. We've tried to stick to that model. It's increasingly harder, honestly, as our valley grows and as Idaho grows. And there's a lot more groups looking at placing dollars here. But we've tried to be true to Idaho, especially on the projects that we do here, and then great relationships with the institutional lenders, the banks, and so but we try to keep Idaho, and keep that money here when on the projects that we have.
We have time for one more. No? All right, I think
Thank you.
good. Thank you so much. Justin, thank you for moderating such an interesting discussion this morning. Let's give our panelists a round of applause. Cheers. The Breakfast Series report will be in the August 15th edition of the Idaho Business Review, and that is the same day that the recorded Breakfast Series will be online. So feel free to rewatch it or share it with others, and that'll be on our website. Thank you again to our Breakfast Series presenting sponsor, Holly Troxel, and our supporting sponsors, Bank of America and the Grove Hotel. I also want to give a special thanks to Boise Center and the Better Business Bureau. Let's give all of the sponsors a round of applause. Please join us on August 21st for our next panel discussion. It is our Women of the Year Circle of Excellence Leadership Panel, and that'll be at the Hemlock on August 21st. The title is Resilience and Reinvention, Navigating Career Pivots. So that'll be a really interesting discussion. And then right here at Boise Center on September 11th, we'll recognize the amazing Women of the Year honorees at the annual awards gala. So I hope you'll join us for that. And our last breakfast series of the year will be on October 9th at the Grove Hotel. The title of that is Business Beyond Borders. So I know Mark is already working on putting the panelists together for that one, and we're super excited for that. For more information about the breakfast series and other Idaho Business Review events, please visit our website at idahobusinessreview.com. Sponsorships opportunities are available for 2026. Our editorial calendar will be out soon, and we will release our 2026 breakfast series topics. So stay tuned. That is all we have for you today. Thank you for attending this morning's breakfast series, and make it a great day.